I've done that. I like the direct flight for us. It's only 2 hours, 20 minutes from start. As well as like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Who's here, loves it.
Tom had that one for town, and Julie passed. There's lots of company, we'll drive back, so we drove her back. She came back. Did several things, we missed this week. Somebody told me about what finish or what salad? Punch bowl, or whatever it's called. No, we're not interested in going through that or seeing it, you know. But she hadn't seen some of these. And they were open from chickens.
I was filming. I did not. I'm sorry, but we know our
Really?
can't stand it. I always get things are better. Construction is fine. We drive there.
Sure. Tom and I did all the Good evening. Welcome to Aldersgate United Methodist Church. We're glad to see everybody here in person and also everybody who's watching us online. We're so glad that you're with us tonight. I'm Carrie Beckenhauer. I'm a member of the Lasting Legacy team here at Aldersgate. First, a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. The restrooms are out the double doors to your left down the hallway. When you see the water fountain, you'll know you're in the right spot. Please silence any cell phones you may have with you, out of respect for the speakers tonight. And you'll also notice that there are emergency exits on every wall of the sanctuary. Not that we expect to use them, but always handy to know where they are. This is our 7th and final presentation in our Life and Legacy Planning series. We are so glad to have our speakers tonight with us, 2 of whom have traveled quite a distance. The speakers are going to talk first. Excuse me. They'll speak first. They'll take question and answer afterwards. We will come around with a wireless mic. Please ask your question into the wireless mic. That allows people online to hear the question. First, we have Kendra Basinger. Currently lives with her boyfriend and 2 cats in Philadelphia. She grew up in western Nebraska and Kansas, received her undergraduate degree at K-State. We won't hold that against her. And also her JD from the University of Wisconsin Law School. After working at the Federal Appellate Court for several years, she returned to private practice and is now a partner at a Philadelphia law firm. Along with her sister Jill, since their parents moved to Lincoln in 2021, she's enjoyed coming to Lincoln frequently to visit friends and family. In her free time, she enjoys photography, travel, watching tennis, and knitting. Jill Basinger currently lives with her husband and 2 children in Bethesda, Maryland. She grew up in western Nebraska and Kansas, received her undergraduate degree from K-State. I think I see a pattern here. And her JD from Yale Law School. After working in private practice for several years, she joined the federal government in 2014. She now works at the Department of the Interior Office of Inspector General. Since her parents moved to Lincoln in 2021, she's enjoyed coming to Lincoln frequently to visit friends and family. Please help me welcome our speakers tonight, along with Larry Ruth, who's a member of Aldersgate, who's going to be helping this discussion. Thank you.
All right, I think I'm the one who's supposed to start. So thank you for inviting us to speak tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here at Aldersgate, and I know many of you, so this is hopefully going to be a nice conversation. I attended the very first event that you all held, and it was really great. I believe it was an accountant and somebody working on estate planning, and I found it really valuable. So it sets a very high bar, and we're very glad to be here. We're going to alternate a little bit on some topics, but Larry is also going to be asking us some questions. And by all means, if you have something you want to ask as we're talking, please just raise your hand. We're happy to cover whatever's useful. So with that, I'm going to give it to Kendra to give a bit of an overview.
Well, you already got brief intros, so I won't go too much into this, but basically Jill and I grew up in Kansas and Nebraska, western Nebraska, a small town, and our parents were both teachers, and and I guess because of that, we always knew and had a lot of interaction with our parents' friends, because most of their friends were our teachers too. Our parents were always at our schools, so it was just a very interactive group. And so relationships that we built then and through our parents' friendships, they have become instrumental to us, especially over these last few years. And then I think Jill will discuss.
So what we're going to talk about tonight, you've already heard, I think, a lot of what I'll call the professional commentators, the accountant, the estate planners, what Larry thought would be useful for us to talk about was a little bit of our own experience over the past, really 3 years. Just jumping ahead a little bit, both of our parents died. My mother passed away about 3 years ago, a little over that, I think. And then our father passed away just last September. And so Larry thought it would be a good idea for us to talk a little bit about what works, what hasn't worked, and what has been useful support for us over the past few months in particular. One caveat I'll say is this is still ongoing. Kendra and I come back frequently, and there's still a lot that we have to do. One of the themes you'll hear is our parents left things in very good order, and that helped us tremendously. But this is a long process, and just today we spent a fair amount of time dealing with some logistical and financial issues, and I think that'll be going on for quite some time. What I would say just before we get started is, as sort of a summary, for us the circumstances aligned about as well as they can when two people we love very much passed away in pretty quick succession. They did a lot to get things in order and to help us, and that has made things much easier. That being said, it's still not a circumstance we wish we were in. Bottom line though, if we boiled this down to 2 sentences in terms of what was helpful to us, and I guess what we would say is you're thinking about what you might want to do for your successors or your family, or maybe what they would find useful, is to make as many decisions as possible. One of the things we'll talk about as we go through this is our parents made a lot of decisions for us, and we found that really helpful. Second, almost as importantly, is make sure people know what those decisions are, because it doesn't do much good if you don't know where the things are, what the choices are, and our parents were really good about that, and we can talk about some of the things that worked really well for us and what we are grateful for them doing. So let me talk a little bit about just our experience, how we came to be here. Our parents moved here in summer 2021 after living in Kennesaw, Nebraska for about a decade. Many of you probably know where it is. It's about 2 hours west of here near Hastings, a small town. They had grown up there to some extent. Both of them graduated from high school there, but they came back to Kennesaw essentially after they both retired, as their mothers both lived there. So they were there for about a decade, but then they moved to Lincoln in summer of 2021. Our mother passed away in March 2022 after 3 months of illness. It was unexpected, but there was 3 months of lead up to it. So that was one situation where our father handled most of the planning and logistics. We mostly witnessed our father. He was the one who managed the service, interaction with the church for the most part, financial and other matters, but we did see all the different tasks he had to do, and that was certainly educational for us, even aside from having to deal with things in the moment. It was helpful for us to see all the things that he did. So some of the things that unfortunately fell on us later were not a surprise. And I'll just say, in something of a theme that you'll hear from us, we saw how important Aldersgate was to them, and it's certainly, I think hopefully every church does this, but we were impressed with how Aldersgate helped our father both in the immediate moments after our mother passed away, but also over the next few months. In the immediate days afterwards, Pastor Joseph, visited my father almost immediately afterwards and helped organize things like the service, helped us decide when that would happen, what the service would be like. People from the church helped my father organize the lunch, and helped with a dinner for out-of-town attendees the night before the funeral. And then we saw over the successive, really 2.5, 3 years, how he relied on the church for a lot of different things. The community of the church was important to him. He participated in a lot of things. I know he was in the Artisans, he went to the men's breakfast, he was a member, I don't remember what committee, a lot of committees. Yes, he was on the committees. Yes, so he was, so he was very involved in the church. So he spent a lot of time here, and it was really important to him, and we saw how that helped both support him immediately afterwards. Oh yeah, he was singing with you. And in college, we sang together. Yes, And just as an aside, many of my dad's fraternity brothers are here, which is not a coincidence why he joined this church. So that was important, and then we'll come back to that later in what helped Kendra and me as of last September. But we also just saw how the community here helped him throughout the grieving process over the successive weeks and months. More in terms of what was important to us sort of on a day-to-day basis, we also saw over the 2 years after my mother passed away, how our father made a real conscious effort to make sure we were informed of things. And we'll talk about some of these in more detail, but he didn't give us every single minutia, but he was really good about telling us what we needed to know and where it was going to be. So for example, we knew my parents, we always knew they had health care directives and power of attorney, but during the period after our mother passed away, Dad made sure we knew where they were. He emailed us some key documents, he put us in touch with a cousin that we really didn't know who was helping to manage a family business matter. So he spent a lot of time doing that. He didn't say it at the time, but I think it was a really conscious decision by him to do that. We knew there were binders with lots of information. We never looked at them. I never opened them up once, but I knew they were there, and we'll talk a little bit about what was in them and why that was useful.
They were all labeled.
Perfect.
All labeled.
Everything was labeled. So we knew about the types of things that were going to be important, even if we didn't know the details. We were also pretty involved in his life, maybe more so than he sometimes wanted us to be. Those of you here at church, I am sure experienced Dad taking a phone call in a meeting. It was invariably one of us calling him. We talked to him almost every day, and he would talk to us. And so we knew about his life here. We knew who was important to him, and we knew who he was spending his time with. And then we also knew about the details about the house and such. So this may not work for everyone or be part of everyone's experience, but for us, it made things easier in the aftermath of what Kendra's going to talk about. So that's what I would say as a preliminary, is that he spent a lot of time making sure we were aware of things, both his personal connections and then the logistics of his financial and other parts of his life. So Kendra's going to talk a little bit about sort of the immediate events in September.
So,
Did you have a?
No, that's
Okay.
so most of you know our father passed away last September, and it was completely unexpected. And so, immediately after we found out, we were obviously in a state of shock and confusion, but we also knew we had to get to Lincoln. So we were trying, we both live on the East Coast, so we were trying to manage travel and everything else, informing family, doing all of the things that we knew had to be done. But one of the things that helped us, again, is based on, my father's preparations and us knowing people here is, for example, our father had given us both a key to the house. Like, these are the things you don't think about that you're going to need. But neither one of us felt confident that we could actually locate such a key in our belongings. So a friend from the church made sure and left a key for us. Just small things like that ended up being extremely, extremely important, and just made it so it was one less thing for us to worry about was hugely important. And another preparation, like Jill mentioned, the binders. We knew that after our mother died, we knew that they had prepaid for funeral. And I didn't know how important that was going to be for us. It wasn't just the prepayment, it was that we knew who the funeral home was. So even as soon as talking to a police officer, who we were able to tell him where a binder was that had the information of the funeral home. So they were able to take care of that. And then kind of leading into that, with the funeral planning, we ended up deciding to have the service very quickly. We didn't talk about it a lot, but because we both live far away, we knew it would be complicated to come back and forth. And so we had it just a few days later. And again, the funeral home was instrumental in that, not having to think about that. Like, they dealt with the county, the death certificate, and then the funeral itself. They would, like the programs, the flowers. So there were just a lot of small, but would have been like big decisions for Jill and I that were taken care of. And it wasn't just the funeral home, it was everyone at Aldersgate, his like wonderful friends, our wonderful friends now. You know, they really got us through a lot of that. And, you know, we couldn't have done it without you all. But, you know, you don't realize how many small decisions there are, and you're not in a great state of mind to make these decisions. Like, so some of the things we had trouble with, or like flummoxed us, was just like, we had a lot of out-of-town family and guests, and so, you know, where were they going to stay? So we tried to find like book a block of rooms at a hotel, and it was a game weekend, which made it a little more complicated. What to have for food, when to have events, you know, transportation for out-of-town guests, just communication in general. And again, Aldersgate was so helpful with that. And also another thing that we're able to count on, which was very lucky for us, is that all of our family basically gets along. And I can imagine how if you don't, then things would have been a little more complicated. So the fact that even if we don't all, I don't talk to my aunts and uncles every day, but I know them, and I know them well enough to talk to them and call them, and I know they all get along, and they can contact cousins, and you know, when we tell certain family members what had happened, we felt comfortable saying, could you call these people? So it wasn't all up to us, so we had a lot of help.
Yeah, one
Do you
thing
have
I'll
anything
just
to add?
I'll add on that is, I know some families have a formal, like a call chain set up. We didn't have anything like that. We just knew, contacted my dad's sisters, and then they started contacting everyone. So, but again, that was based on the fact that we knew them pretty well. And I will just say the hotels, that was really difficult. That was really difficult. That almost derailed me, at least, because that was a complicated planning thing that was just beyond me. And a number of people here at the church actually stepped in on that, and that was really very helpful. But
I was gonna say, don't overestimate how many, like what your state of mind might be like at that point. Like, you think you're with it, but you're not at all. And so it's good to know that you can rely on other people, and
yes,
you need to trust other people, because you're not making the most reasoned decision.
So those were some of the, I guess, the things that in the days immediately after. Let me talk a little bit about financial planning that was helpful to us. And I know you've already had a speaker who talked about sort of estate planning and those types of things. This is more the things that helped Kendra and me. So another theme that you'll hear is that our dad had good relationships with everyone. His financial planner, his accountant, his attorney, his insurance agent, and even the exterminator. I have had a lot of conversations with our exterminator because Dad talked to him, and
he told us that when he found out, he had to pull over and take a minute for himself. My exterminator would not need to do that.
No, I would not. So he had good relations with people, and he built the relationships with his financial planner, with his attorney, and others. And one of the very useful things is that they worked together. So Dad made sure that, in fact, I think he found his attorney through his financial planner, but he made sure that they knew each other and worked together. And so that was one less thing that we had to do, was to introduce them to each other and make sure they had the documents. So that was very helpful to us. They've worked together very well, and that was something that was set in motion by my dad quite some time ago.
And actually our grandmother.
Yes, our grandmother was also, knew many of these people. And then again, that's sort of serendipitous. Not everyone is going to have 3 generations of people in the same place with the same relationships. But Dad did put people, made sure that they knew each other and what was going on.
Jill, you mentioned several times me about your neighbors.
Oh, yes.
Our neighbors,
Yes.
they're wonderful. Dad's neighbors, now our neighbors, beside him and across the street. He was unsurprisingly very close to them too, and they have helped so much,
Yes.
Even, emotional and logistical support when we haven't been here. They've been able to keep an eye on the house and let us know when something's up, and if we forget a key, they're there.
Mm-hmm.
And if we aren't there to take the trash out, they'll do that. So we appreciate them so much. And yes, so having again, I don't know how much of this is just our dad's personality, but just his relationships with people, and that we knew these people from him.
Yeah, he made sure we knew that.
We knew them. We knew them already.
First.
So that was also helpful.
So the other thing that Dad did that was good, and I mentioned this already, is that everything was in really good order. Really good order. I didn't know, I'll be honest, I didn't know what my dad's investment was. I didn't know what his bank was. I didn't know any of these things, but I knew where the information was, and he had everything in order. Everything from vehicle titles to health insurance to lawn maintenance. It was all very clearly organized, some electronically, some in hard copy. There was a spreadsheet for monthly bills and payments due, so we knew when things were going to be happening. We knew when there was auto pay, so that was very easy. And it extended to the entire house. Our parents had cleaned out a lot of stuff when they moved to Lincoln, but Dad continued that, so there was not a lot of extraneous stuff we had to deal with. He had thrown away or shredded most things that weren't important. One thing I'll mention that was surprising to me, though, is hard copy records proved surprisingly important. Kendra will talk a little bit about kind of the password issue in a minute, but it was really useful to have a binder. And I kind of, at one point I was like, why do you have all these binders, Dad? Nobody needs that, just do it online. It was really great to have everything in a binder with the electric bill, the insurance bill, so I knew what name the accounts were in and how to get hold of it, because it wasn't always easy to get online immediately. So not everything, it wasn't pages and pages and pages, but just one bill was in a binder, so we knew where it was. And then a separate set of things for service people, so we knew who to call to keep the lawn continuing to get mowed. So that was actually really surprisingly important. It's actually something I've started for my kids, is a binder with where the accounts are and who does the lawn, what plumber to call. It just saved a tremendous amount of time for Kendra and me. And then the other thing is that while we didn't know all the banking and financial details, as I mentioned, we did know where to find it. And I will also say, and this does get maybe a little more into professional decision making, it's been helpful that a lot of things were in a trust. That made it easier to have some things, we were able to access some things easily. We also found out we were included as signatories on certain accounts. I didn't know that until the time, but once it happened and we found the accounts, it made it very easy to transition things. So those are some practical things that made things very easy for us just to step into things.
Yeah, it would have been very hard for us, being a signatory on the bank accounts helped it so that, to continue paying bills for the house, we didn't have to take it out of our own funds. Mm-hmm. We could just keep everything going as he had already set up, which again took a lot of stress away for us.
Now, I don't know if he didn't tell us because he didn't want us,
no.
getting into stuff beforehand, but it was very handy afterwards.
Yes.
So, Kendra's going to talk about passwords. This was a big thing.
Yeah.
Passwords.
This is, in addition to hard copies, make sure someone has your phone password. Or write it down. I know you're not supposed to write it down, but just that someone knows it. And it's not, so that people can snoop on you or, go through all your stuff. It's because even though we had, helpfully, a list of his passwords that he had written down, every account requires multi-factor authentication. And so we'd get the password in, it was good, and they're like, oh, we'll now send an email for you to, make sure it's you, or a text. But we couldn't access those accounts. And we couldn't, my dad had very good phone security, so his texts weren't coming up on the lock screen. And so that was an issue. It was a challenge. And we tried to find a way around it, and there were talk about you'd have to get a court order from, Apple would have to ask for a court order to get the password. But we ended up doing, I don't remember how it all quite happened, is we had to wipe
Yeah,
it.
I went to the Apple store.
Yeah.
And they really should have asked for documentation that it was my phone and that I had the right to do this. They just did it and reset the phone, so we were able to use it for multi-factor. But
we did lose all the pictures that were on there, everything else that was on there, which maybe Dad wanted. I don't know. But that was what we ultimately ended up doing, and just had to kind of start all over again. So, and I know at some point, he had told me his password, but I didn't write it down, and I didn't pay attention, and none of us could remember.
Yeah.
So now Jill and I have each other's passwords. Like everybody, we all have each other's passcodes.
So the last big topic we're going to talk about is just some of the personal connections that have been helpful. And again, I think some of this is just good fortune for us. Some of it, though, I think was more deliberate by our father and the people he knows. The church has been important. That was important to him, and I will say that Aldersgate has brought a lot of these threads together for us. As I mentioned, a lot of my dad's fraternity brothers are here in this church, but he also, once he joined here, I know he made many other friends, and as I've already mentioned, he was very involved in the church, and I know that when our mother was ill, that he relied on people in this church, even people who didn't know him or my mother terribly well. And as I said, he participated in many things in the church, and I think was a active member of this church. And then when these things happened, people in the church jumped in and helped organize things, just as they did with my mother. The lunch, the service, help with the hotels, and support more generally. And again, as with my mother, we met with Pastor Joseph immediately afterwards. And all that has made things much easier in a very difficult situation. And so it has certainly made me think more about my own relationship with my own church in where I live. Although I think of this as my second church as well. I really have two at this point. And people in the church have supported us over the last few months as well in a way that's been very, very gratifying. So it's definitely been something that's given me some food for thought over the past few months. Kendra, would be the last few.
Sure. And then in addition to the church, there were other connections, relationships, as we mentioned, his neighbors, but then also his bank. His bank knew him personally. It had been my grandmother's bank too, and both grandmothers' banks. And so when Jill and I walked in, they're like, "Oh, we remember you from when you were came here with your grandma." But having a local bank and just having that he kept up that relationship, even though we moved to Lincoln, was helpful. And then, as Jill mentioned, the financial advisor worked with the estate attorney, and then we were able to put them in contact with the accountant, and who had worked with my dad and my grandmother forever. And so it all made things just go much more smoothly than they could have gone. And it's like we can call all of them on a Zoom, and if somebody's missing something, they know who they can reach out to. And so that has been, again, just back to the relationships, it's been a really, really important thing.
So that's pretty much what we had planned to talk about. I will just, I think, hopefully there's some questions and
Yeah,
Larry
I got
has
a
some.
couple. I got a couple that I think is. You talked about you knew so much from your dad.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you had to sit down and talk about those things. Did he initiate these, what I would say are tough conversations, or did you initiate it, or was it just automatic? Because there's some families where
Yeah.
you won't talk about sex, you won't talk about this, you won't talk about that, religion, you won't talk about the hereafter, what you're planning on, what death is.
Yeah.
But you seem to have had a good relationship, good enough relationship to do that. What do you recommend to parents and to grandparents who might want to make sure that they're passing it on? What do you recommend?
I think that's going to be so family. And I will say for us, I mean, there was never some big sit down. What I will say is that after, I think our grandparents, our grandmothers in particular, became ill and passed away, that's when our parents started talking about it more with us. And that's when we had some more conversations. We had some fairly deliberate conversations about power of attorneys because they made sure we had the documents.
Yeah, we did.
And that did prompt some conversations.
Did those documents have do not resuscitate, or had you talked about
You know,
death and
it's funny, our mom, like, I remember this from the time I was pretty young, her saying, I do not want to be on a ventilator. Like, you know, if there was a story of someone who'd been in an accident or something, she's like, I don't want that to happen to me. So I knew from the time I was pretty young what she wanted, and that she wanted cremation.
she did want cremation?
Yes, and we knew that. And I think at those times, like our dad would kind of jump in and tell us, so it wasn't like a real formal conversation. But then as everyone got older, it became a little more.
But you two were so close together. You were making you knew what the decisions were. Can you imagine
Our
a family?
relationship
Yeah. Can
also.
you imagine a family with perhaps more children, or those that don't talk as much, having to make those decisions without knowing what their parents might want?
Yeah.
Well, and as I said, Dad certainly became more deliberate about it
Okay.
after, I will say, our mother passed away, because as I said, we had a specific conversation about some family matters that he was kind of the person in charge of. He knew he had to start transitioning those things, so we started having deliberate conversations about that. So it was a gradual process for us.
And then there was like with the cousin he introduced us to, there was set up a Zoom call to everyone. We set up a Zoom call so that everyone could meet and talk and introduce and see what the issues were with this family business.
We do that every Sunday evening in our family. Did you do something like that? Or?
No.
Okay.
We called all the time. They called us. So.
We just talked.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, for us at least, it was more episodic, and then as something particular came up.
The other thing I was interested in exploring a little bit, you've talked several times about relationships and how important relationships were to them and to you in going through the process. Can you tell us how you get good relationships with an accountant, with an attorney, with perhaps a funeral? It takes intention, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really have to sit down. I like to think of it as finding good baby times, good baby checkups. Sometimes you say to a lawyer, I don't know if there's anything we need to talk about. Let's have a cup of coffee. I don't care. Something to keep to build a relationship.
But you know, that's something that happened. I can't do that on the East Coast, to be perfectly honest, in Washington.
Okay.
I can't. My lawyer's not going to do that. It's been so much easier.
We're always so happy when
much easier here.
In fact, I was going to ask you to compare having a funeral in Philadelphia or Bethesda with Lincoln and then with Kennesaw.
It's not to put in a pitch for Lincoln, but I do think it was the perfect medium because everything is here. One of the things about Kennesaw that was a little hard is it was a little more isolated. Things took longer. We could not.
This would have been so much harder.
Our attorney is a fine attorney, but I'm never going to have a cup of coffee. I'm never going to just chat with him. That's not going to happen. So I think some of it is specific to a slightly smaller place.
And I think doing things in person, like even when things could have been done electronically, and I would ask them, like, why are you driving to Kennesaw to, get cash out or something? Or why are you driving to Hastings to see your accountant? But he would do that. He would drive out there to drop his papers off. He would drive out to Kennesaw. And partially it's just because he wanted to go out there, but also, he thought he should go see these people. He went to see his financial advisor.
Relationships were important to him because where did he buy his last vehicle and what was it?
Kennesaw, a Ford.
Yeah.
In the Ford dealership that you practiced with.
Yep.
Yeah, he got the oil change there too.
Yep. Yeah, he drove to Minden for the dentist.
Yeah.
The dentist actually, the dentist in Minden, when my mother was sick, my mom really liked to have clean teeth. And when she was sick, the dentist drove from Minden to Lincoln just to clean her teeth.
My gosh.
And, my dentist.
Our dentist wouldn't know that one.
No.
So I think some of it's place specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Any other?
No, just relationships. I think
Yeah.
the power of relationships and when you need them and the need to intentionally build them. They don't
Yep.
just happen. That's like Dave and Bill and I. We intentionally built our relationship.
Yeah. Well, I've started, I have an accountant and a lawyer who are actually the same people. And, I have started having phone conversations with him more than just emails. And Dad's financial advisor is now helping me. And I'll have a phone call with him even if I'm not going to see him. So I'm trying to do more even over the phone so they at least know who I am a little bit.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. Happy to take any other questions. That's really what we had. Like I said, things worked about as well as they could for us. So, but a lot of it was our parents planning and telling us about those plans. Yep.
I'm just curious to know, have you sold the house?
No.
Or you're still maintaining your dad's house?
We were treating it as a second home for them.
Okay,
So
just wondering, because
Yeah. Yes, we haven't done.
Good.
We like Lincoln.
we do Lincoln. So
My question is, if you had to say one thing that's been, I don't know, missed or incomplete or something, what would be one thing that you wished, the piece of information you wished you would have had, that you've had to unearth and dig for, pray about, whatever it was?
The phone password. The phone password was immensely important. It sounds like a little thing, and that it's I don't know, not something we should worry about, but your life is almost on your phone at this point, and your email and everything is on there. That was really important.
no, it took us a lot of time to manage that.
Yeah.
I'd give the same answer because so many of the things that were really well planned and laid out, it became hard to do a number of things because we didn't have that until we finally figured out we just had to wipe the phone. So honestly, that's the one thing with all the planning and everything else. It took an inordinate amount of time.
Other questions for Kendra and Jill?
Oh, my question more is what is the one thing that helped you the most? I mean, my password is my fingerprint. Good luck with that.
Yeah, that's
But actually, maybe that could work, just before the cremation.
Real quick.
But then I do have a backup pattern.
You know what? And that's why I was so surprised the hard copies were helpful because there's so many things. There are so many accounts. Cable television, the garbage,
The newspaper.
the newspaper.
Newspaper. We had to cancel the newspaper. Just like things like you don't even think about.
And I carried that binder around for weeks because it had every single thing in it, and we just went through it one by one and just checked things off. That is, like I said, I cannot claim to have done all the things my parents did. I have every intention of it, but I have not done it. The one thing I have done is I have a binder now.
Yeah,
So
I do too.
I've got that sitting there, and my kids know where it is, and Kendra knows where it is. So we've got that.
Each of you had separate binders?
We each have separate binders.
Yes, yes, indeed. So, yeah, I'm hard copies. So,
Okay, this has absolutely nothing to do with your father, but
Okay.
as a computer security person,
Oh.
at my last job, I've had to go through people's computers after
Mm.
they passed away. If you've got something on your computer that would be hurtful or you don't want your family to see,
Yes.
get rid of it, please. The pictures, they don't want to see them. They don't want to see those emails. So
That's a good
do
point.
your family a favor.
Like,
that's,
We-
yep.
we made the decision that it was, once we got like Dad's Gmail password, that was his private business. We didn't look at anything. It wasn't our concern. So, you know,
But
but yeah.
Do you see yourself coming back once a year, possibly? Is there a time that you would be
I mean,
cutting us off?
oh,
we don't have that.
Tongue in
plan.
cheek.
we still have family in Nebraska, and look, we went to college in this area. We grew up here, so we feel a strong connection to this part of the country.
And we now have season tickets to Nebraska
Yes.
football games. So we'll be back.
So no, we're
You're kind of stuck with it.
Sunday.
There are more volleyball fans in this audience than there are football fans, so just
did.
FYI.
I did get to go to a volleyball game. It was fantastic.
Yeah, great. So.
Jill, I'd ask you, after the experience and stuff like that, are you started working with your son and daughter in regard to this?
You know, that would be a good thing for me to do. What I've done, like my kids are younger. They're 19 and 21. Had to think a minute. No, 19 and 22. So I have sat down with my son and showed him kind of the binder and where things are, and I can tell you he reacted exactly how I would have at 21, which was, okay, fine. Why are you showing me this? But he knows where it is now. So, and I will say for me, for us, it became more important after our mother passed away. Until then,
We could rely on our dad.
yeah, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So I've started it, but haven't spent a lot of time yet.
You all both seem very erudite and with
Oh.
it. So,
It's really nice. Thank you. We fake it really.
okay,
really.
the question I have is, my family Zooms every Sunday, and that's really weird, actually. You know,
That's our thing.
nobody else does it. It doesn't feel like to me. But anyway, my wife's family. How do I start a conversation, or how might you start a conversation with your spouse, or if their parents aren't like
Yeah.
this? You know, I go out to the family farm all the time. They've got a corporation that goes on, and everybody's well, I sit in a different room. You know, just I'm not part of the board, I guess. But and maybe it's all been done for me, but I'd like to talk with them because it feels to me like a lot of this is going to come down on
You?
yeah, yeah. As an outsider and a mediator, when things fall apart, they fall apart, and it's a difficult time to do those things. And I'm very appreciative that my folks have included me in the conversations and all these things. But I can see something else on the horizon that might be available. So if you have any thoughts about starting that conversation. And I know families are different. But
I will say my experience has prompted some of those conversations with my own husband and his family. My husband and I have spent a lot of time talking about this and kind of our experience. He has now started having a number of conversations with his parents, so he was really the interlocutor. I talked to him, and then he has had these conversations with his parents. I know that they've started talking about this, and I know that they hadn't done that before the last few weeks and months. And that's how we started.
And I had some experience before with my ex-husband's family, his father had passed away, and they were a close family, but they didn't talk about everything, and there were some disputes, and nobody knew where anything was, and it was just, they got it done. It was just harder, and it took longer, and they did know, and his father had been ill, so it's always horrible and it's always a surprise, but they had some advance warning, but it was just, things get done, it's just harder. It's just harder, and the conversations happen after the fact, maybe when you're not in the greatest state of mind, but things do calm down, and people are able to have conversations and get things done, and nothing is really an emergency. Usually there are some things that are emergencies, but there'll be time. You can get things worked out. But it would have been great had his family talked before, but it wasn't going to happen.
I just told my spouse and told him he needed to start the conversation.
Yeah,
but I'm not involved in those conversations. So, but yeah, it certainly prompted us to discuss it. So that's my 2 cents.
I guess my one suggestion here is we really, and Harry and I are terrible about this, we don't have anything organized, okay? I don't even know where the stuff is. He tells me it's down in the basement somewhere in some folder. But anyway, my sister's son died unexpectedly at the age of 48 a year ago, and he was a single guy. And talk about passwords then. And even though his brother was a techie for sure, and his job was that, it was impossible. So we say all this stuff like for us to get our act together, but it really would be good if everybody were able to get their act together, especially if there's nobody with them.
Yes.
You don't expect to die at the same time, and you really don't expect someone to die when they're 48 years old.
Right.
But when you were talking about what happens, what's the worst thing, you're right, because then she couldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And every place she went, there was a roadblock trying to sort out his stuff, and she didn't know all the insurance things she had. It was just a mountain of stuff, and you don't think to talk about it early. So while we're talking to our kids, then our kids should be filling out their stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Kendra and I have gotten better also about talking to each other.
Yeah. Every time we go on a trip, we tell each other, we remind each other where things are.
And again, I hope my spouse and I do not pass away together, but I have started talking with Kendra to make sure that there is somebody else for that precise reason. She knows where my stuff is.
Yeah. I know how to get into our house.
Yes.
And I know her passwords.
Yes.
So.
You're both well educated and you understand the legalities of life. Did you find anything unique or difficult when you had to deal with Nebraska or officials from Nebraska which were different from what you might expect in your home states or your current states?
We're both lawyers, but I don't know anything about estates. So this was all, I actually don't even know what my own state does. So I was no more surprised by Nebraska, I guess, than anywhere else. I've actually found it pretty easy to deal with, although I'll just say, I've been really happy with our estate attorney. Well, it was our father's estate attorney. He's made things very easy. And honestly, I found it pretty straightforward, honestly. It's been pretty painless here. So, yeah, I don't have any dire stories on that.
About 10 years ago, I read a book called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande,
Really?
which wasn't as much about death and dying as it was planning for maybe where, it's been like 10 years, so I don't remember the whole book, but like planning where you might want to, do you want to go the legacy? Do you want to go the landing? Do you want to go, what type of a place would you want to go to as you're getting older and having more difficulties? And so that your kids would know what things were really important to you. Do you want to have a cat?
Right.
Do you want to be in a place where you can have an animal? Do you want to be in a place that wakes you up at 6:30 every morning for breakfast? Or do you want to be in a place that allows you to eat whenever you would like to eat? And I guess my suggestion was, go listen to that book or go read that book, because it's something that helps you get the conversation started with your children.
It's a great idea.
And I shouldn't be doing a suggestion when
No,
you guys are up there, but
Have you read it? Have you read it?
Yeah, I read
Phil
it.
Gawande.
I read it when my mom was ill.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
gosh.
they both nodded their heads, so I knew that they knew the book too.
No, I found it,
Did you find it
I
helpful?
found it great. Very, very powerful. So.
Other questions for our speakers tonight? Well, I certainly want to thank our speakers, and I want to thank everybody for coming to our last session of our Life and Legacy Planning. Thanks to Nancy's skills and abilities, all of our presentations have been recorded. I know some of you have had siblings and kids and cousins. Get onto our YouTube channel for the church and watch things. You can always go back and watch this presentation along with any of the others that preceded it. But I wanted to thank you for coming, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Please join me in thanking our speakers tonight.